Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This month's complete set presentation is going to be the very first set that I ever got cards for, which is the 1986 Top set. It has probably more cons than it does pros, but we're going to talk a little bit about the set itself like we always do. Some of the unique features of this set in particular, and also the 1986 baseball season at large. So we'll start with, you notice the binder's different. So I purchased this off of somebody who worked for the Minnesota Twins in a training capacity, which was pretty interesting. I purchased an 86 and an 84 set off of him probably about 20 years ago, maybe 22 or 23 years ago even. I think it was the early 2000s. And what was kind of unique about it when they arrived is I found out a lot of the cards were actually autographed. So here's two examples. At the time, he worked for the Twins during their World Series run of 1987. That's why they were able to get autographs of Steve Carlton in the set. So there's going to be a lot of Twins autographs in here primarily, and that's going to be about it. It's not every single Twins card that is autographed, but several of them are, which kind of is interesting because a lot of those guys are going to be part of the 87 team that won the World Series over the St. Louis Cardinals. So the card design itself is maybe not the most eye-catching design of the 1980s, but I think of the three sets that were released in 1986 between Fleer, Donruss, and Topps, it probably has the most catching design with the bold lettering on the top with the black border, followed by a white border at the bottom with their, obviously the name in bold lettering, and their position is a little circle right here. So here's the Steve Carlton Topps design. The back is not as eye-catching. This one's actually a dark red cardstock, which made it kind of hard to read unless you have the right lighting, which is probably a downside to the design itself. And here's a league leader card. We'll talk about some of the subsets, and this is actually one of the team leader card, which I think are actually some of the better looking cards in the set, are the team leader designs. You can see it's kind of an image superimposed around a white border all around, and it has the team leader stats on the back, which for this one, actually, Mike Schmidt is featured quite a bit because he was the MVP of this season. All right, so with that said, let's jump into the 86 Top set. Leading off, it kind of commemorates Pete Rose, who played his final season in 86, and actually a lot of great players played their final season in 86, several Hall of Famers and even a Hall of Fame manager. Pete Rose, obviously not in the Hall of Fame, but would be if he didn't have the gambling thing on his record. Features his entire card history, and the only playing card that's missing is 87, which captures his 86 stats, which was his final season. I never was able to pull this from a pack. These aren't my cards, as I mentioned before. The ones I had back in the day were pretty banged up. I never changed out the sheets for this one, so some of the old plastic sheets are a little bit wrinkled, as we'll see as we go through the set. But let's kind of further jump into it. The corner we have Tony Gwynn. I'll point out some of the rookies and Hall of Famers and talk about the season as we go through here. We got Lou Whitaker, I think needs to be considered for the Hall of Fame, so I say that every time I'm looking at the set. One of these sets from this era. This set obviously features the great 80s uniforms. They're very much of those softball style jerseys that don't have buttons right here. Typically they're pullovers. Some of them do, like the Dodgers kind of kept that design. I believe the Yankees did too. Several other teams did, but many of them have like these pullovers with the piping around the collar and also the arms and sometimes the waist itself. So we got Eddie Murray. All right, moving along. Got Ken Griffey Jr.'s dad there towards the end of his career. So Lenny Dykstra is one of the chased rookies from that set. I remember him being one of the guys that we tried to hunt down and get, especially during the 93 season when he had a really good season with the Phillies. People were trying to see if they had a bunch of Dykstras in their collection. One of the things that hurts this set itself, it doesn't have the Canseco rookie. They had him by traded, including Barry Bonds and Will Clark and things like that. But the Fleer set had the Jose Canseco rookie in it, which made it a little bit more coveted of a set, and it was also a little harder to find the Donruss and the Fleer cards. Topps cards were everywhere to be found. The rookies that we chased after at that time were like Vince Coleman was another one. A couple of years later, we started going through our collection, see if we can find Cecil Fielder. Harold Reynolds is also one that's kind of a name of note, more so because of his broadcasting career. We got John Franco as well. Those are the ones we kind of chased after, along with like Ozzie Guillen as a White Sox fan here. He had his rookie card here, even though he was in the traded series of 85. Good old Fred Lynn up here, Dwight Evans. Not Hall of Famers, but good players from the era, near the end of their careers. Dave Winfield. Good old Sean Dunston of the Cubs. Rocket of an arm. Darryl Strawberry. The Mets, obviously 86 season was when the Mets won their second World Series and haven't won one since. We got a final season of Tony Perez. As I mentioned, a lot of players had their final season in 86. Tony Perez, being one of the Hall of Famers. One of the other Hall of Famers was Tom Seaver, who finished his season with the Red Sox at that point, played in the did not feature in the World Series to my knowledge, but was on that team. We got Gary Gaetti, who was a pretty good player during his era. Other players that were of note that finished their seasons or finished their careers in 86 were Dave Kingman, Vida Blue, Bobby Grich, Dusty Baker, George Foster, and Bill Russell, and then Earl Weaver finished his managing career in 1986. And later, obviously, was inducted in the Hall of Fame. Here we got Nolan Ryan. Steve Carlton again. Good old Alan Trammell. This one kind of a throwback picture to me. It looks like one that could have been taken like in like the 1960s or 70s. The way it kind of looks in this image here. I always thought that when I got that card as a kid. So you could buy these in wax packs, cello packs, rack packs, vending boxes, and a complete set. The complete set itself, if it's still sealed, it actually holds a little bit more value than a lot of the other complete sets of its era because it was a little bit of a lower production than it was for the other ones. 87 was the other big year where we had cards released. I'm sorry, the Tiffany sets were the other ones that were, I kind of got distracted there for a minute. I just got a message on my phone. But the 86 set also had the Tiffany cards available. Obviously, this was probably maybe of the 84, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and even 90 and 91 when they produced those sets. This is probably maybe the least coveted of the bunch because it didn't have those big rookies. We got Bobby Grich again, as I mentioned. Good old Orel Hershiser, early career card of him. Gary Carter with the Mets. Steve Sachs was a good player. Here's Donnie Baseball. Raleigh Fingers. It's his final card, as well as Rod Carew is his final card, even though they featured last in the 85 season. We'll get to Carew in a minute. Mike Schmidt was your NL MVP, as I mentioned earlier. Your AL MVP, we'll kind of talk about some of the award winners. We had Roger Clemens winning it for the American League. He also was your Cy Young Award winner. We have Mike Scott, who also threw a no-hitter on September 25th. Going back to Clemens for a minute, who was your Cy Young Award winner for the other league, as I mentioned. Actually set a record for 20 strikeouts in a game in 1986, which has later been matched, including one of the games that I was at when Kerry Wood did it in the 98 season. Some other things, your MVPs were Mike Schmidt, Roger Clemens, as I mentioned. Your managers were John McNamara of the Boston Red Sox and Hal Lehner of the Houston Astros were your managers of the year. And your rookies of the year were Todd Worrell of the St. Louis Cardinals, who set a rookie record for saves at that time. And Jose Canseco was your rookie of the year for the other league. So here features the accomplishments from 85. Vince Coleman set the rookie stolen base record. We had Dwight Gooden, youngest 20-game winner in modern history. Again, somebody that I think, if they ever could reconsider some people for the Hall of Fame, I don't think he has the stats overall. But that period of time where he was dominant is, I think, comparable to a lot of the other pitchers that we sometimes look at for a few seasons, such as like Dizzy Dean, where he didn't have like a huge resume, but he had a very dominant resume during a period of time. I think that also is Dwight Gooden. We got Phil Niekro, who was the oldest player to throw a shutout. We have Keith Hernandez, most game-winning RBIs in a season. Tony Perez, the oldest player to hit a grand slam. I think that's been top since then. And Pete Rose, most hits lifetime. Venezuela, most consecutive innings to start a season. With no earned runs. So kind of fun cards. I kind of like the record breaker cards. I just think they have a kind of cool looking design for 85. Moving on. Good old Ron Darling there. Jim Fry, manager of the 84 Cubs that made the playoffs. Ted Simmons, Hall of Famer. Tommy John towards the end of his career. Dwight Gooden's regular card. Steve Carlton again. Ozzie, as I mentioned earlier. Darren Dalton, very popular Philly. Paul Molitor. It's one of my favorite images from the set where like his hat's falling off. Mike Scott, I mentioned earlier, your Cy Young Award winner. Jim Morris, or Jack Morris. I said Jim, sorry about that. Tim Raines with the Expos. Tommy Lasorda, Carlton Fisk. Kurt Gibson. So this was the year I really got into baseball cards. Here's Mookie Wilson. Throw that out there for Mookie Chilson, if he's watching. Earl Weaver, Jim Rice, former MVP and Hall of Famer. Kirby Puckett, great player there. Sutcliffe had a former Cy Young Award winner. Don Sutton, towards the end of his career with the Angels. Cal Ripken. And I had mostly Topps cards, so I didn't really get a chance to get access to the other sets. I was able to trade for some 85 cards. Chuck Tanner had his final season managing in 86. Good old Jack Clark there. And, you know, I didn't treat them well, so they were all junkers by the time I started really caring about the conditions of cards. Here we have Lee Smith. So that's why I later went on and just bought a set, which was already in a binder at that point, which was ideal for me at that point. And we got Vince Coleman. But it was also the first year I really watched a lot of baseball, and I remember watching, here's Joe Carter, Terry Francona, who'll be Hall of Fame manager at some point. Bruce Bochy down here. And not the Bruce Bochy that we think of, though. I think it's Bruce Bochy, actually. I think that's how you pronounce his name. But I started watching the playoffs a lot. Here's the Cecil Fielder card I mentioned earlier. And I was really enthralled and wanted to pull for the Boston Red Sox. And, you know, they started the playoffs well by winning a 7-game series against the California Angels, known as at that time. We had like Reggie Jackson on that team. Trying to think some of the other Angels. Wally Joyner was a big rookie for them at that season. But the Red Sox were the ones who advanced, obviously led by Roger Clemens, their star pitcher at that time. That Jim Rice was still on the roster, Dwight Evans. A lot of good players in Red Sox history and lore were featured on that roster. And they faced a New York Mets team who won the National League Championship Series 4-2 over the Astros, who had featured like Nolan Ryan, Glenn Davis, Mike Scott. Just didn't have enough in the tank to be able to get past them and lost 4-2. Here's Tom Seaver up here with the White Sox. Julio Franco, another good player of his era. Here's Rod Carew's last card. This was actually the first time they introduced Turn Back the Clock cards too. And I kind of remember these images pretty well as I collected these cards as a kid. And when I was able to acquire like a lot of their original cards, I was kind of like, well, this is one of my favorite cards. But I'm like, why is it such an image ingrained in my mind? Well, it goes back to these. So we have, this is the traded series, or Venezuela 76 Seaver. Talks a little bit about the seasons there. 71 Mays, which is a great card. 66 Robinson when he was traded over to the Orioles. We have Ramirez from 61. But those are kind of fun, those cards that were kind of introduced. I know Dylan, Double D Vintage, is one that likes to talk about those a lot. We've got Kingman towards the end of his career, Sparky Anderson. Moving on. When we got to the World Series, it was mostly known for, here's our first autograph in the set, and it's Ken Herbeck, so not a bad one to have. He's part of the Twins Walk of Fame. If you go to their stadium, he's got a statue there. And the series was back and forth. It looked like the Red Sox were going to pull it off in the 6th game and then lost it late. Famously, here's Whitey Herzog, who passed away not too long ago. Famously because of this guy, who gets a lot of the fault, actually, who, you know, more of the blame probably is really on the bullpen and the misuse of the bullpen by the manager, who set up a situation where, like, one little misplay could have plated 2 runs, and that's exactly what happened. They had a larger lead than that. It didn't have to come down to that. But Buckner got the blame forever until they won the World Series again. It's like the fandom finally forgave him in Boston, even though he himself was never really kind of wore that one too bad on his own sort of feeling of his personal accomplishments in baseball. But obviously it was something that was kind of a black mark on his career unfairly in many ways. And later they were redeemed, obviously, when they finally won the World Series in 04 and then again in 07 and again in 13. We got Burt Bryleven, Hall of Famer. But that's kind of my memories. I remember those games pretty distinctly, and my friends and I talking about those games as we were waiting for them to come on at night. Here we got Dale Murphy. Moving through here, show you some more cards. Bobby Cox, Hall of Fame manager, but not with the Blue Jays. By that time he was with the Blue Jays. I think that's Bobby Grich down there. Brett Saberhagen was another card we kind of went after. Not really his rookie card, but he was a really good pitcher at this point in time that everybody really wanted to get as well. There's some fun images in this set. Ricky Henderson. Like that big smile on that card. I mentioned Bill Russell earlier. Wade Boggs. The Hall of Fame actually had a few people who were voted for and later were inducted during that season as well. So we had Bobby Doerr from the Red Sox, Ernie Lombardi, who spent a lot of time with the Cincinnati Reds in his career, and then Willie McCovey was the big name that was put into the Hall of Fame that season. All right, let me pull up your league leaders as we kind of go through those, and I can talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about who was at the top of the charts. We got Keith Hernandez as we go through the rest of the set. Your average leaders were Tim Raines, and Wade Boggs was kind of in the midst of winning a bunch. Bruce Gossage, Tony La Russa. Our batting titles during this era, Boggs batted 357, Raines at 334. Your home run leaders, going to move through here, Dennis Eckersley. Or Mike Schmidt in the National League, he also was your RBI leader. Your home run leader in the American League was Jesse Barfield. If you remember him, who played for Toronto and later for the Yankees for a bit. And then Joe Carter, who later played for Toronto, was a star for them during their World Series. And he led it for the league while he was with Cleveland at that point. Talk a little bit about the pitching ones here in a minute. Let's get through for a couple more pages. Rusty Staub towards the end of his career. Got Willie McGee, your 85 MVP. Tanana had quite a big career. There's Dave Parker. Hope he gets a chance in the next Hall of Fame voting because they had eras committee is going to be reviewing the era where he played. I'm not sure if he gets thrown in pre-80 or post-80 because he played bits of his career in both. We got Dale Murphy. Not sure what the rules are, how they determine that. Here's the Bruce Bochy we all know of, soon to be a Hall of Fame manager at some point. Bruce Sutter. Fernando Valenzuela. Lee Smith. We get good old Dusty Baker. As I mentioned, he finished his career in '86. Billy Martin. It's the last card of Billy Martin as a manager. Died a few years later. In a car crash. Good old Steve Garvey towards the end of his career. Roger Clemens. All right, so your pitching leaders, we mentioned obviously Clemens having a big season because he was your MVP too. He had 24 wins on the season, 2.48 ERA. He did not lead the league in strikeouts. This actually was Mark Langston. Your saves leader was Dave Righetti. And over in the National League, Mike Scott led the league in ERA. He led the league in strikeouts with 306. Venezuela was the actual wins leader at 21, and Todd Worrell was your saves leader at 36. Your stolen base leaders were Ricky Henderson in the American League at 87 and Vince Coleman with 107 in the National League. All right, moving on. George Foster finished up his career that year. Hall of Fame manager Dick Williams. Old Dave Stewart, Ryan Sandberg. Reggie Jackson, and now we have our All-Star cards, which is kind of a boring design, if you were to ask me. Ozzie Smith, Dale Murphy, mentioned Willie McGee before. Here's Gary Carter, Gooden. Tudor had like a crazy ERA in '85. It was like under 2. Reardon, Don Mattingly, George Brett, Ripken, Henderson, Winfield, Fisk. Guidry had his final great season in '85. Was features an All-Star card in '86 Topps. Will Ozzie Smith, getting near the end of the set now. Pete Rose is a manager card. He gets 2 cards in the set. This is his second year as the manager of the team. There's Hojo, Howard Johnson, good old Harold Baines, everybody's favorite. Dawson. Reynolds, I mentioned earlier, is one of the rookies. Vita Blue in his final playing career, although he's got a card in 87. Al Oliver, I think that's his final card, final season 85. Bill Necro. And then I have a few traded cards. I don't know how I got these over the years. I think I picked this one up separately, and some of these were in lots and stuff I picked up, but nothing too exciting here other than maybe the Will Clark card. I also have the Barry Bonds graded, but I don't have that out right now, and then a couple more cards there. The 86 traded set is much more coveted than the regular set in 86. So that is that, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and look forward to putting out more content here very soon. So have a great rest of your day.